I once held a book that did not belong to this world. Its pages never faded with time because it recorded stories that never grew old. Stories of love, fate, and souls that had once touched each other in the eternal flow of humanity. This was a record written by God, a place where stories of destiny, love, and souls that had drifted past one another through the river of time were preserved. In that book, there was a story I could not take my eyes off. A love between two people who seemed destined for each other, yet were tested by their very nature. God had written it down, every detail, as if he had foreseen it all. Yet he let it unfold exactly as it was meant to. It was the story of Pisces and Sagittarius. Two souls from two different worlds. One belonging to the deep ocean, the other to the endless roads. They met, they loved, but could they stay together forever? I read the entire story, and I will tell it to you. But remember, not all love stories have a beautiful ending. And this story may not be what you expect. If there is one thing I have learned from God's book, it is that every encounter in this world has a reason. Not everyone meets to walk together until the end. Some people appear to teach us a lesson. Some to warm our hearts for a brief moment. And some to change us forever, whether they stay or not. Pisces and Sagittarius were one of those couples. God wrote about them with remarkable delicacy. Each page reflected their truest emotions. From the initial wonder to the tender attraction. And then to the quiet pain that neither wanted to acknowledge. A fateful encounter. She was Pisces, a soul as gentle as water, flowing easily into others' hearts but also fading away just as easily if not cherished. He was Sagittarius, a wanderer who never liked to stay in one place. A flame constantly burning with a desire for freedom and exploration. They were two opposing forces. But destiny had its own way of bringing them together. The day they met was not a mere coincidence. It had been written long ago. Only neither of them knew it yet. That day, the air was crisp, and the streetlights cast golden reflections through the glass window of a small cafe. Pisces sat quietly in the corner, her eyes absorbed in the pages of a book. Yet her soul drifted somewhere far away, lost in dreams she dared not share. Just then, the door swung open. A gust of wind rushed in, carrying the scent of journeys yet to be completed. Sagittarius stepped inside, his radiant smile lighting up the space as if the whole world were his stage. Or perhaps it was a crowded party, where Pisces stood quietly in the corner while Sagittarius drew all eyes with his natural energy and charm. Wherever it was, the moment they saw each other, both knew the other was unlike anyone they had ever met. Pisces was drawn to Sagittarius' gaze. There was something in his eyes, a boundless freedom, an untamed spirit. As if he always knew what he wanted, and was never afraid to chase it. Being near him, she felt her world expand. As if all the dreams she had long suppressed were finally awakening. Sagittarius, in turn, was mesmerized by Pisces' quiet presence. Unlike the loud and hurried people he had met before, she was like a calm river. Yet she carried an unseen strength that made him unable to look away. In her presence, he felt a warmth he hadn't realized he had been searching for. And so, they talked. At first, it was just a few casual words. But then the conversations grew longer, deeper. They spoke of dreams, of the things they wanted to do, the places they wanted to go. Sagittarius told her about his travels, about endless roads and unfamiliar skies. Pisces listened, her eyes sparkling as if she were traveling alongside him through his words. And then she shared her own dreams. Dreams she had never told anyone. Things she had kept hidden, fearing the world would mock them. But Sagittarius did not laugh. He looked at her and said, "Why don't you try? The world is vast. You just have to step out." His words were like a breeze stirring the depths of her heart, awakening desires she had never dared to acknowledge. For the first time in her life, she felt that anything was possible. No longer just a distant dream. Sagittarius did not laugh. He looked at her and said, "Why don't you try? The world is vast. You just need to step out." His words were like a breeze stirring in Pisces' heart, awakening things she had never dared to think about. For the first time in her life, she felt that she could do anything. It was no longer just a distant dream, an attraction that cannot be explained. From that moment on, Pisces and Sagittarius were drawn to each other in a way neither of them expected. Sagittarius was fascinated by the way Pisces saw the world. Although he had traveled to many places and met countless people, he had never seen the world the way she did. She did not need to go far to feel the beauty of life, just a quiet afternoon. A gentle rain, or a soft melody was enough to make her happy. This left Sagittarius bewildered. He had always believed that happiness lay in endless journeys, new challenges, and uncharted destinations. But Pisces taught him that happiness could be found in the smallest things, even without having to go anywhere. As for Pisces, she was captivated by Sagittarius' freedom. No one had ever made her feel both safe and exhilarated at the same time. With Sagittarius, she felt stronger, braver. She started doing things she had never imagined before. She began to believe that she could step out of her comfort zone. She started wanting to explore the world the way Sagittarius did. Their love was like a strange exchange. Sagittarius taught Pisces about freedom. Pisces taught Sagittarius about peace. They both changed for each other. But was that change enough to keep them together forever? Some souls meet not to stay together forever, but to create something in each other's lives. And so, their love began. I remember continuing to read through the pages of God's book. The story of Pisces and Sagittarius was not just a simple love story. It was like a piece of music, filled with highs and lows. Water and fire, two opposing elements. One was soft, the other burned brightly. One dreamed of eternal connection, the other yearned for freedom. And God wrote, "The love between water and fire is not impossible, but it will be a challenge." The love between Pisces and Sagittarius began like a soothing melody, a love song between water and fire. At first, they were drawn to each other by the enchanting contrast. But then, that very difference became the greatest barrier between them. I remember when I read this part. God wrote, "Some loves are most beautiful when left unfinished, because when they reach the end, people no longer see what they once adored in each other, but only the wounds left behind." And that was their story. At first, Pisces loved Sagittarius' passion and excitement. Being with him made her feel stronger, more adventurous. The early days of their love were filled with laughter, endless conversations, and journeys to new places. But then, Pisces began to realize that Sagittarius did not belong to anyone. He belonged to the open roads, the endless journeys, the adventures that had no final destination. Even though he loved her, he could not stop. At first, Pisces tried to accept it. She told herself, "I can learn to love the way he does." She tried to get used to Sagittarius' freedom, to the times he left without warning, to the moments he disappeared from her life in pursuit of something new. But the more she tried, the more exhausted her heart became. At first, every time Sagittarius went far away, Pisces would wait for his messages. She waited for a simple question, "Are you okay?" She waited for a short message, "I miss you." But he never asked. Not because he did not care, but because he did not think it was necessary. In Sagittarius' mind, love did not mean always being together. He believed that even if they were apart, his heart would always belong to her. But Pisces was not like that. She felt lonely in her own love. She started asking herself, "How can he live without needing me? Why am I always waiting while he never does?" The conversations that once lasted until midnight became hurried replies. The gentle words of concern became short, lifeless texts. Pisces started counting the days he disappeared without a word. Sagittarius thought she understood, that love did not require restrictions. That even when apart, their hearts were still connected. But deep inside Pisces, an unease was growing. Like waves crashing against the shore, unnoticed by anyone. She could feel the change, but she was afraid to speak of it. She feared that if she did, their love would shatter. God wrote, "When love reaches its trials, people often blame each other not because they have stopped loving, but because they are afraid of losing each other." And so, Pisces and Sagittarius had their first argument. That day, he was preparing to leave again, a trip he had not mentioned to her. She only found out when she accidentally saw the plane ticket on his desk. She was silent all day, but in the end, she could not hold it in any longer. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with sadness. Sagittarius looked at her, slightly surprised. I didn't think it was a big deal. I'll only be gone for a few weeks. But you never ask if I'm okay when you leave. Sagittarius sighed. You don't need me to ask. You know I still love you. Pisces looked at him, and at that moment, she realized. They loved each other in ways that were too different. For Sagittarius, love was trust, was freedom. Was knowing that even if they were apart, they still belonged to each other. But for Pisces, love was presence, was gentle words. Was the small gestures he had never noticed. Water and fire, no matter how beautiful, could not truly become one unless both made an effort to understand each other. After that argument, they made up. But the crack in their relationship had already formed. In the days that followed, Pisces tried not to care. She tried to pretend she was fine. She tried not to ask too many questions when he became busy with his travels. But the more silent she became, the more wounds filled her heart. And then, one day, she couldn't bear it anymore. She looked at him, her eyes no longer just asking a question but holding a final hope. Can you stay with me? Her voice was gentle. But her heart trembled, waiting for the answer. He took a deep breath, his gaze wavering, as if he were battling himself. But then, he smiled, not a smile of happiness, but one of resignation. I love you, but I cannot stay. At that moment, Pisces' whole world crumbled. But she didn't cry. She simply nodded, as if she had known this ending all along. She no longer had the strength to endure any more. But how could he make that promise? If he did, he would have to give up a part of who he was. If he didn't, he would lose her forever. And that was the moment they realized. Love alone was not enough. God's words in the book of fate. I remember when I reached this part, God had written, some souls love each other deeply. Yet they cannot walk together forever. Not because they don't love enough, but because they love in ways too different to reconcile. One seeks attachment, the other seeks freedom. They may change for each other, but they can never completely change who they are. And so, one of them had to make either accept this love as it was, or walk away to find a love that fit them better. Pisces and Sagittarius stood before the hardest choice of their lives. They had loved. They had changed because of each other. But could they stay together forever? I don't want to end this chapter with an answer, because the answer doesn't just lie in the story of Pisces and Sagittarius. It lies in each of us, those who have loved, who have fought, who have suffered because of differences that could not be bridged. So, if it were you, would you choose to hold on or to let go? The final question. Pisces stood before Sagittarius, her heart heavy with the question she could no longer avoid. Can you stay with me? She was no longer angry, no longer. Only a quiet sorrow remained, as if she already knew the answer. Sagittarius looked at her for a long time, his eyes no longer shining like they had in the. Not because the love had faded, but because he knew. If he said yes, he would have. If he said no, he wanted to keep her. But he could not promise her what she needed. I love you, but I cannot stay, he. Pisces closed her eyes, and silent tears fell, like raindrops slipping through the cracks of her heart. She knew that if she held on any longer, she would only hurt them both. Then go. Words as light as the passing wind, yet sharp enough to cut through. And so, Sagittarius turned away. Not once did he look back. Pisces watched. God once wrote, there are. They end. And just like that, years passed. Pisces and Sagittarius each lived their own lives. They walked paths. But fate has its strange ways of testing people. One day, they met again. No longer the dream-filled youths they once were. No longer burdened by unanswered questions. They had changed. Pisces was no longer as fragile as she used to be. She no longer waited for someone to stay, nor placed all her happiness in a single love. Sagittarius was no longer just a wanderer chasing endless journeys. He had traveled far enough to understand that sometimes, happiness is not an eternal adventure. Time had passed, but it could not erase their memories. They looked at each other, no resentment. No regret, only appreciation. "Where have you been?" she asked. Her voice as soft as the autumn breeze. "Everywhere," he smiled. But for the first time, he realized that the place he missed the most was the place where she had once been. And this time, they did not say goodbye. Only their eyes met, a silent acknowledgement that, though they no longer walked the same path, their love still remained, forever. "Where have you been?" Pisces asked, a gentle smile on her lips. "Everywhere," Sagittarius replied. But for the first time, he realized that the place he missed the most was where she had once been. They did not need to say anything more. Because sometimes, a single glance is enough to say everything. We once loved. We once suffered. But now. And so, they parted. But this time, it was not a loss. It was ICL. Not. Some people come into our lives not to stay, but to teach us how to love and grow. Pisces and Sagittarius did not have the kind of happy ending people often expect. But they changed each OT. Pisces no longer feared love. Sagittarius no longer feared staying. And that is what made their love beautiful. God once wrote, "Not so I closed the," because I knew, no matter how it ended, their love would live on within these pages. I had read this story, felt every emotion that Pisces and Sagittarius had experienced. And I realized one thing. Not all love needs a perfect ending to have meaning. Some love exists. Some people appear. Pisces and Sagittarius loved in their own way. They did not fail in love, because they're L. After hearing this story, do you see yourself? Have you ever loved someone but couldn't keep them? Have you ever? If this. Would you choose to hold on to someone even knowing they were never meant to stay? Or would you choose to let go so both of you could find Grier? Share your story in. Love is a journey that we all must go through. And perhaps, your story could help someone find their hour. Because whether you are a Pisces, a Sagittarius, or anyone else, you also deserve a love that is whole, whether it lasts forever or is just a fleeting moment in time.